So, if you were with us for the last deep dive, you'll remember we left things in a pretty dark place.
We really did.
We were standing in the ashes of the Confederate salt works on St. Andrews Bay. The Union raids had smashed the furnaces, the workers were gone.
And the sky just went black. The whole system collapsed. We usually talk about history as this, continuous flow, but this was a hard stop.
A full stop. Yeah, the Civil War didn't just pause the economy there, it erased it.
It did.
And that leads us right into today's session. This is chapter 4 of our St. Andrews series, and honestly, this might be the most critical chapter. It deals with the silence after the war.
That's a great way to frame it, because destruction is loud, it's fast, rebuilding from zero, but that's quiet, and it's incredibly difficult.
We're looking at about 15 years, starting around 1863, where St. Andrews Bay is, for all intents and purposes, a ghost town. The sources call it a vacuum. So the question for us today is, how do you restart a civilization when the government has basically written you off?
And they absolutely had. I found this one quote from a government official surveying the area in the 1870s. He didn't propose a rebuilding plan or anything.
No.
He just labeled the entire region desert country.
Which is so ironic considering we're talking about this lush, subtropical coastline. But you get the sentiment. Economically, it was a desert.
No troops, no banks, no infrastructure, just a few families, subsistence fishing, totally cut off.
So to fill that vacuum, you can't just wait around for a railroad or some government grant. You need a catalyst. You need someone who looks at that desert
And sees a blueprint.
Exactly. Enter Captain Lambert Milbank Ware.
The maritime architect.
I love that title for him. So we're going to spend this deep dive unpacking how this one man with a very specific background basically single-handedly engineered the return of civilization to the Bay.
And that background is crucial. He wasn't just some random drifter.
No, not at all.
In frontier history, you get two types of people, right? The desperate dreamers and the calculated experts. Ware was firmly in that second category. Seventh-generation American from a maritime dynasty that started back in 1675.
But specifically from the Maryland and Chesapeake Bay tradition. And I want to dig into that because the sources really imply that this geography, the Chesapeake, is the key to his success in Florida.
It absolutely is. I mean, think about the Chesapeake Bay. It's huge, but it's tricky.
Oh, yeah.
It's full of shallow water, shifting shoals, oyster beds. If you learn to sail there, you learn a very specific skill.
The shallow draft vessel.
Exactly. You can't sail deep-hull ocean liners in 4 feet of water. You need boats that can skim the surface, but still carry heavy loads.
And St. Andrews Bay in the 1870s is a labyrinth of sandbars.
A deep-water captain would have run aground in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But Ware? Ware looked at that water, and he recognized it. He had the exact technical toolkit.
He understood a harbor isn't just pretty scenery, it's a logistical puzzle. If you can't get the boat to the shore, you don't have a town.
And he proved he could handle that puzzle in the most dramatic way possible. This is the part of the story that always it blows my mind.
Yeah.
The journey.
Oh, the sloop.
The sloop.
I looked this up. A standard sloop from that era. We are talking about a vessel that is maybe 20 feet long.
Let's put that in perspective. A 20-foot boat is what you take out on a lake for a few hours.
Oh, wait. With the cooler.
It's basically a big rowboat with a deck and a mast.
And Ware sailed this thing from Maryland down the Atlantic coast.
Around the Florida Peninsula, which is, that's notoriously dangerous water.
And into the Gulf of Mexico.
It's a voyage that would be reckless today. With GPS and a fiberglass hull, doing it in the 1870s, that borders on insanity.
But think about the optics of that. Imagine you're one of those few fishermen living in a shack on the bay. You've been isolated for 15 years. And suddenly this guy sails in.
In a tiny boat he piloted all the way from the mid-Atlantic.
It immediately establishes his authority. Competence is the only currency that matters in a place like that. You don't need a resume when you survive a trip like that.
Everyone knew instantly, this man is serious.
So he scouts the area in 1877, sees the potential, and then he comes back for good around 1879, 1880. And this is where the architect side comes out. He doesn't just, pitch tent anywhere.
Now, he buys a very specific piece of land, Buena Vista Point.
And for cheap, right.
Oh yeah, pennies on the dollar. It was neglected tax sale land. Nobody saw the value.
But Ware saw two things. The first was the elevation, a commanding view of the bay.
Which is nice for living, sure. But more importantly, he saw the hydrography. He found a spot where deep water came right up to the shoreline.
That's the logistician. He knew that if he ever wanted to scale up, to bring in steamships and heavy cargo, he needed that deep water access. He wasn't building a home, he was securing a port.
Exactly. But here's the problem. He has the land, he has the vision, but he's standing in a vacuum. No building materials, no store, no workforce.
This is what I call the Minecraft problem. You spawn in a new world with nothing. What's the first thing you build?
And most people would say a house.
Or a shelter, yeah. But look at Ware's order of operations. It is so logical. He didn't build a house first.
He built a sawmill.
On Panama Bayou.
Right, because he realized the bottleneck was lumber. You can't build a town without boards, and there was nowhere to buy them. So he imported the machinery, set up the mill, and created the means of production.
It's vertical integration from day one. He processes the raw material.
Then he builds his house. Then he builds the mercantile.
And finally, the crown jewel. Ware's Wharf.
And once that's all in place, he brings in the team. By 1882, his brother Francis is there. Later, another brother, a sister. It becomes a family dynasty.
The sources call it Waretown. And reading about it, it feels less like a village and more like a planned development.
It was a platted commercial district. He wasn't waiting for a town to happen organically. He designed a functional grid with residential plots, a commercial hub, and the industrial wharf.
Let's talk about that commercial hub, the mercantile. Because I think today we hear mercantile and we picture a quaint gift shop.
Right, selling scented candles or something.
Exactly. But in the 1880s, the mercantile is the operating system for the entire region.
It's the center of gravity. You have to strip away everything we take for granted. There are no banks. So who holds your money? Who gives you credit for fishing nets? The mercantile.
No Zillow, no newspaper.
So the mercantile is where you hear who's getting married, what the price of mullet is in Pensacola. And crucially, it was the post office.
Which brings us to Zadie Ware, Lambert's wife. The notes describe her as waterfront aristocracy. I just love that phrase.
It's such a vivid image in this rough, sweaty, fish-smelling town. Here's Zadie Ware, always well-dressed, overseeing operations, and she served as the postmistress.
A position of immense power in a frontier town.
Absolute power. You controlled the flow of information to the outside world. If you wanted your letter to get on the boat, you went through Zadie. Her presence signaled that St. Andrews wasn't a camp anymore. It had order. It had a first lady, in a way.
Speaking of the boat, what was actually moving across Ware's Wharf?
Right.
You have normal stuff, flour and hardware coming in, salted fish and lumber going out. But there's one export item in the records that I really, really need you to explain to me.
I think I know where you're going with this.
The gophers.
Gophers.
And for anyone listening who isn't from the Deep South, we aren't talking about furry rodents.
No. In Florida vernacular, a gopher is a gopher tortoise, a land turtle.
And the shipping manifests for his schooners, the Nettie and the Cleopatra, list hundreds of live gopher tortoises as cargo.
It sounds bizarre to us, but it was brilliant frontier economics. They were a food source, but unlike fake that you have to salt, a tortoise is its own preservation system.
So it's fresh meat that doesn't spoil.
Right, and they're heavy. So Ware used them as live ballast. He'd load the bottom of the schooner with turtles to stabilize it, sail to Pensacola or New Orleans, and then sell the ballast as soup ingredients.
That is incredibly resourceful. A tough break for the turtles, though.
A very tough break.
Yeah.
But it shows his mindset. If the land provides it, he finds a market for it.
But you can have all the turtles and lumber you want. If you can't move them reliably, you don't have an economy. The schooners were great, but they depended on the wind.
To really build a modern town, Ware needed a partner. He needed steam.
He needed the SS Tarpon.
This ship is legendary in Panhandle history. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was the town's heartbeat.
It was. The Tarpon ran a triangular route, Mobile, Alabama to St. Andrews to Apalachicola, and it ran that route for 34 years.
The stats are just relentless.
Yeah.
1,735 documented trips.
And that consistency, that's the magic variable, right? In a frontier environment where everything is chaos and unpredictable.
The Tarpon was not. The locals said you could set your watch by its whistle.
That psychological shift is huge. If I'm a settler, knowing for a fact that the flour and the medicine will be at the wharf on Tuesday, that lets me plan. That lets me build a permanent life.
Exactly. It removes that existential anxiety of isolation. That reliability allowed St. Andrews to grow from a few hundred people to thousands. It allowed for hotels, for doctors, for real commerce.
And it was a symbiotic relationship. The Tarpon needed the deep water wharf that Ware built.
And the town needed the Tarpon. They were holding up the civilization of the bay between them, the wooden dock and the iron ship.
But as we know, stability is usually just a phase. And for St. Andrews, the pivot starts right at the turn of the century.
The first domino is the captain himself. Lambert Ware dies on July 4th, 1905.
Which feels like a scripted ending for an American pioneer.
It really does. But when he dies, that singular autocratic vision dies with him. His family continues the business, but Waretown as a concept begins to fade.
The town is growing up.
It's becoming a public entity. In 1908, St. Andrews officially incorporates. It shifts from being a private enterprise, basically a feudal estate ruled by the Wares, to a public municipality.
Then later, in 1927, it gets annexed by Panama City.
But the bigger threat to Ware's legacy wasn't politics. It was technology.
The world was changing.
The whole logistics network was changing. By the 1920s and 30s, you have railroads cutting into the interior. You have paved highways. Trucks are starting to carry the heavy loads.
You didn't have to wait for the boat anymore. The island effect was broken.
And then you have the tragic finale of the SS Tarpon itself.
1937, and this story is just heartbreaking.
It was heavily overloaded.
Yeah.
They were trying to squeeze every last bit of value out of the route. It hit a violent storm off Panama City Beach, and it capsized.
So many lives were lost. It was a major tragedy.
It was. But historically, it was also a symbolic death. When the Tarpon went down, the era of maritime-dependent logistics went down with it. The rhythm broke. You couldn't set your watch by the boat anymore.
Because the boat was at the bottom of the Gulf. So the Tarpon is gone. Trucks are taking the cargo. The Ware dynasty has faded. What happens to the wharf?
Well, the industrial commerce dries up. But remember, Ware's original insight from 1877.
The location.
The location was still perfect. Deep water, great view, protected harbor. Those things don't change. So in the 1960s, it stops being a working cargo wharf.
And becomes the St. Andrews Marina.
Which is what you see today. If you go down there now, you see charter boats, people going out fishing, tourists walking around with ice cream.
But you're standing on the exact same footprint. The pilings are probably in the same mud. The function changed from survival to recreation, but the anchor remained.
It's such a powerful arc. You have a man who arrives on a tiny 20-foot sloop, looks at a silent coastline and says, I can build a system here.
And he was right. St. Andrews didn't just come back after the Civil War. It was engineered. It was architected by someone who knew that before you can have a society, you need a place for the boat to tie up.
And that brings us to what happens next. Ware brought stability and order. He proved the location worked. But when you create stability in a place as beautiful as Florida,
you attract more than just hardworking settlers.
You attract speculators.
Ware was about the honest, gritty work of logistics. But once that foundation was laid, the sharks started circling.
That's always the second wave of the frontier. The builders come first, then the marketers.
Which sets us up perfectly for Chapter 5. We are going to leave the honest work of the Ware brothers behind and dive headfirst into the Cincinnati land boom.
A massive real estate scam that tried to sell St. Andrews to the world using some, well, let's call it highly creative geography.
I've seen the maps they used. They basically invented a city that didn't exist.
It's a wild story.
We can't wait to unpack that mess with you. But for today, next time you're at the marina in St. Andrews, just look out at the water. Don't just see the jet skis. Try to visualize that 20-foot sloop sailing in from Maryland, carrying the seeds of the entire town.
And watch out for the gophers.
Always watch out for the gophers. Thanks for listening to this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you on the next one.